In the last few months, there's been quite a lot of articles and things like that written on the Japanese internet, and I've included these in the description. Just have to put them in the browser and to translate into English. But it's also a topic that many of my subscribers are interested in, and it's also a job I used to do. I used to work in immigration in Australia, and I know quite a lot about it. And basically, it seems that Japan will be opening up a little bit more. There's a lot of changes in the visa schemes coming up. There's a new digital nomad visa coming in. But I look at these sort of things in a bigger picture. Is the sort of people that they're targeting. So Australia is a immigration country, and we've had a lot of population that's come through, especially in the last 15 years, and they've come from all various parts of the world, and it's all been targeted, and it seems this is what the Japanese are doing as well. At the moment, there seems to be a change in sort of the way the world economy is going to operate, and a lot of talk about shipping and supply chains and all this sort of stuff, and it seems that it'll be less globalized, so countries will need to be more sustainable in their manufacturing and things like this, and this seems to be what Japan's targeting as well. If you look at those articles, building, manufacturing, services, things like this, and also targeting the digital nomads, so the more people with more capital, more know-how. So it seems to be sort of a whole banquet of thought that's gone into this, and this bodes well. It doesn't really matter sort of what skill level you're at. It seems to be a little bit of everything for everyone. So I like to base my opinions on data. This is from the Japan Ministry of Health, Labour and Welfare. Have a look at that rise, have a look at the trend. Shout out to our new Patreon member, Maria. Gets the Gigi dance. Go Gigi, go Gigi, go Gigi. And a kiss for Maria. Good boy. Thanks, Maria, for supporting the channel. You're a legend. As far as I know, every country has a declining birth rate, a declining population. I don't know of any that's going up. So there's a global competition for people, and especially skilled people and people with money. So this is sort of what's happening. There's a competition, economic competition for people, and different countries will have different benefits brought to the table. And this is what's really interesting for me, is that Japan has so many pluses, because it has a low wage base, and it's had a low wage base for a long time, and it's got an excellent healthcare system and a high level of education, and they seem to be very competitively situated for possibly what's going to happen as the world economy starts to change. So I think Japan is on the verge of a boom. Japan was the first country to have the bubble burst, the first country to have sort of significant population decline. So it seems that they'll be the first one to come out of it too. So they were also the first country to have this sort of different monetary policy. So if anybody's ever watched the documentary called The Princes of the Yen, I suggest you watch it. And it was sort of the first foray into sort of unconventional funding of mortgages and things like this. So it was sort of experimental, which led into the big boom, and it's sort of what we've been seeing with property prices and things around the world. So it's something that I've taken a big interest in recently. So fundamentally, I don't think much has changed throughout history. If you look at the great powers, even 300, 400 years ago, they weren't after land. Even though they sailed around looking for unconquered lands, they're mainly after people. Because where there's people, you can create wealth and opportunities and things like this. So it fundamentally hasn't changed. A lot of the explorers and stuff around the age of exploration, they used to land on many pieces of dirt, but they just sail on if they didn't find sort of a lot of people there. So without people, without labour, without the human resources, there's not much can be done, and this is sort of the same situation. States can only sort of prosper when they have the right people and have a labour force and things like this. So this is what's happening now. There seems to be a battle to get the right immigrants. It doesn't matter which country you are, to have enough people to fulfil the jobs that the country's going to need. And in one of the articles it mentioned, which was quite surprising, is that Japan, because of the rise in wages in China, China was always a very low income country and cheap place to do business and manufacturing, but it's not anymore, and it's a concern for China and Japan, is that they're sort of, because the wage level is sort of around the same, or even though Japan's slightly higher, there's a competition there still for labour, and this is where Japan is at the moment, and they need semi-skilled labour in construction, aged care, things like this. They can't afford to pay sort of the Australian wages or the American wages for this, but they're competing for sort of the market of Vietnamese skilled workers, Filipinos skilled workers, because they're competing with China now, because of the wages have gone up in China. So all different sectors they're competing on. So even the digital nomad, they mentioned that the Japanese tax rates are too high with the digital nomad types, but they're still competing for them with this visa. The traditional digital nomad types are the types who don't like to pay tax, and they sort of don't have any allegiance to anybody, sort of thing. So they're still trying to compete, and they'll be competing on sort of what Japan has to offer, which is a safe place to live, a clean place to live, all the good things everyone knows about Japan. So even if it's slightly more expensive to be a digital nomad, Japan is still competitive, and they've felt that probably from their research or whatever, that there's still quite a lot of people that would like to live in Japan on the digital nomad visa, even though it's slightly higher tax rate. So it's going to be interesting. I think Japan's pretty well placed because it has what they call in politics soft power. So soft power is sort of the reputation. It has a good reputation for pretty much everything, and it's a place where people would like to live. So even though it's not a what do you call it? It's not as high earning as other places. There's stuff that compensates. Headed to Japan, Vietnamese residents, Chinese, South Korean, Philippines, Brazil, Nepal, Indonesia. Have a look at the trend. The competition for labour, it's going to be good. In one of the articles I read, I can't find it anymore. I tried to find it to potentially put in the description here, but they estimated that At the moment, the population of foreigners in Japan is 2.1%, and by a certain year, I think they picked 2050, it'll be 15%. So if they're mentioning these sort of figures just in random articles on the Japanese internet, you can pretty much guarantee it'll possibly be higher than that. That's sort of like a softener. And on one of the articles, they did a survey with the general Japanese population, and it's sort of to gauge whether they'd be for more immigration or less, and it seems quite positive. So the only negative one was a lot of people answered that they like more immigration, but when they asked, would you like more immigration in your area, the percentage went down, but it was still positive. So it's sort of they recognise the positive aspects of immigration, but they might not necessarily like being a minority in their own village, sort of thing. Okay, real data, NHK polled. More foreigners needed, more foreigners in your area. So you see there's a slight difference here. People like foreigners and they feel that they're needed, but it's a little bit less in the area they live. We call that NIMBY in Australia, but have a look at the trend. So this situation where there'll be more labour imported into Japan and more open for immigration, they've also scrapped the old system of labour into Japan. The way it worked, it still works now actually, I think it hasn't passed yet, but soon, is that you would do sort of an apprenticeship or something. So you go work for a company and you would be put with that company, and if you decided that you no longer wanted to work there, you had to go home. But if you stuck it out and for so many years, you could get permanent residence. But what seemed to be happening, and this is alluded to in the article, is a lot of companies were sort of abusing the system, probably not paying the right money or overworking people, doing the dodgy stuff. So a lot of foreigners, they worked for these companies and they had enough of it and they just disappear, and they'd be staying here illegally. So this happened a lot, and it was mainly because of the rules. You couldn't change companies. So if you come here to work as whatever for a company and you didn't like the company, you didn't like the way you were treated, you couldn't switch to another company even if it was the same industry. But they've relaxed that rule now. So if you come here as, let's say, a carpenter, learning to be a carpenter, and you didn't like the company, you could switch to another carpentry company and still maintain your visa and everything like that. So that's what they're debating now, because they've come to the realization that bolting somebody down to the one company is not a good policy. So that's what's happening. So here's the article. I'll leave the link in the description. You can have a read for yourself. Just put it in the browser and translate to English, just how the labour laws are changing to meet the needs. So have a look at this statement from the Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. The government seeks to create an inclusive society, and we want to make Japan a country that foreign workers will choose. So that's a statement from the top. Okay. There we are. This one, MSN. So have a look at the detail here. The approval for the novel program given on Friday by Cabinet Minister details individuals entering Japan on 3-year training visas. transition to school worker classification, permitting up to a 5-year stay and potentially achieving permanent residency. So that's just not for totally skilled workers. Okay, so let's have a look at the Nikkei. It's sitting just under 37. So have a look at this. So we'll go monthly. So have a look at this sharp run up here. That's after the labour laws have been announced and easing of visa restrictions. So when the market moves, it means decisions have been made. As for agriculture, I've thought about this a lot, and I'm either going to be right or I'm going to be wrong. But Japan imports a lot of food, and if shipping's going to be more expensive and there's going to be sort of these interruptions and the population of immigrants is going to go up, it means that imported food in Japan is going to go up, and there's going to be more people to feed in Japan. That can only be good for the domestic agriculture. So at the moment, if Japan imports 50% of their food, it might go down to 30%, and population going up, this would mean a bigger market for Japanese farmers. So I noticed on one of the articles, they did mention farming and agriculture and related industries. That's what it said. So this seems to be the case. So if this is true, this has a bright future for agriculture here. I'm a rural Japan channel, so I like to talk about this as much as I can. And another thing too, I lived in Tasmania for quite a while in Australia, and Tasmania has an excellent reputation for clean, tasty food. And I noticed during the boom times in China, which is coming to an end now, the big boom times, a lot of the rich Chinese would even import their milk directly from Tasmania. So there'd be planes landing at the airport in Tasmania, and they'd even directly bring their milk back, so they'd have fresh milk. So it'll be less than 12 hours from when it come out of the cow's udder. They'd be on the tables for the rich in China. So Japan has a similar sort of reputation for good clean food, good clean tasty food. So even at the high end, rich people are always going to exist in different countries. So there's always going to be a market for that. So I see the whole sort of situation with agriculture in Japan to be a positive. So this is another thing too. People that follow my channel obviously interested in Japan, but also the agricultural side and the rural living side. It seems to be not a better time to come, to be honest. At the moment, it's not a big thing. The sort of, they're going through the machinations of changing the visa situations for people. They've just brought in entrepreneurial visas for people who want to do a startup, like the Bentons have in agriculture, and they're doing honey. I honestly don't think there's a better time to come, all things considered, looking at the information that's out there at the moment. And the thing is, in Japan, decisions don't get made very often. The Japanese aren't famous for being big changes of things. But when they do change things, they don't change things back. So that's the positive on it. People who don't make a lot of changes, when they do make a change, they tend to stick with it. So these changes coming through, I think they're going to be here to stay. And if you look at the stock market, I looked at the Nikkei 200, and this was yesterday, because when I read stuff on the internet, I like to back it up with a little bit of data. Like, if this is true, then it should be reflected in the stock market. Because the way I look at it is, people that drive the stock market have the information first, and then us plebs, we get it last. That's the way I might be cynical, but that's the way it seems to be to me. And I looked at the last 3 months' data, and the stock market is just totally blown up. It's at almost 37,000, and that's almost a 1/3 jump, which is a crazy jump, isn't it? So that's happened. This news has come out. You can see for yourself the articles, and this seems to be happening. And I think Japan is on the cusp of a boom, possibly. But anyway, that's just my gut feeling. Anyway, I better go back in. And as always, hope you like the video. So here we are. This one's a Bloomberg. This one happens to be on a paywall, but you can read it in Japanese. But have a look at that. That's the reality of the situation. Japan Times. Digital nomad visas require 10 million income. That's about 70,000 a year, US dollars. So it's not that high of a benchmark for these sort of professional guys. So spouses and children will also be allowed to stay in Japan. Quite a perk, isn't it? So have a look at the trend here. This is April 24th, 2023. And here, farming, fishing, food manufacturing and food services. They already had a shortage all the way back then. So, dire need of workforce supplementation.
Let's go back home.